morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to A Word on Cybersecurity, my LinkedIn Live program that happens every Friday at approximately this time. I appreciate you being here, whether here is live or is actually via recording. I'm a little discombobulated. I had some um, scheduling issues that came up, all of them my fault. And that actually, believe it or not, plays into my word for the week. It's going to be an interesting week to talk about because we have some things that are kind of constants now. You might have heard that there is a war going on in Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine. And one of the bits of news out of that continues to be the fact that in the cyber war between the two, um, it isn't going as most people assumed it would before the war started. The assumption was that Russia, having had the services of some huge, well-known APT groups, would come in and pretty much overwhelm Ukraine on the cyber front. Well, that hasn't happened. And there have been a lot of reasons for that. Ukraine has had years to prepare. Ukraine has their own pretty good cyber force, and Ukraine has gone in and recruited. We'll call them mercenaries, even though it's not clear that everyone's being paid. Uh, but it's been a much more even playing field in the cyber war than people thought it would be. And that's had some interesting consequences and non-consequences. Ukraine has, by and large, been able to keep their critical infrastructure operating. And Russia has seen some non-trivial hits on their cyber infrastructure from all of these various players. A lot of other things continue, and I have to say that in the realm of full disclosure, one of the things that's happening right now is a return to fairly significant in real life cybersecurity conferences. I'm referring to Black Hat Asia. Black Hat Asia is taking place right now, or it's getting ready to take place. I think we actually have some of the members of my team, Omdia, on their way to the Far East. They're going to be there, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that researchers have been just waiting to tell us. So that should be an interesting thing in the week ahead. We're also getting ready for some other in real life conferences. In June, we have RSA happening in real life. I'll be heading out there. And we're getting ready for late July, early August when Black Hat USA will be going on. I'll be there as well. Looking forward to both of those. You know, I mentioned that I was a minute or two late, and that was because of a misconfiguration, a human induced misconfiguration in one of my calendar programs. And that's going to play into my word for this week, misconfiguration. That's critical because of a couple of things. Number one, misconfiguration is almost always a human generated vulnerability. You know, we do have some automated processes that can result in a misconfiguration, but I would say in 99% of the cases, a misconfiguration exists because some human somewhere clicked the wrong checkbox or rotated a dial in the wrong direction or did something that is going to result in something being configured in the way it's not supposed to be. Now, we're hearing about some of these because there are some very well-known things that are coming to light. For example, Mitiga, a cloud incident response company, has come out with a report where they say that a misconfiguration could leave even a firewalled Google Cloud instance exposed to exploitation. Now, in fairness, if you read through this, it involves several things having to be misconfigured in sequence in order to make this a vulnerability, but that can happen. And this gets back to misconfigurations around something that is, well, fairly common, because in this case, it involves the way Linux deals with ports. And in many cases, for Linux to see something as a port, it's actually seeing it as a particular file format. Tie a bunch of these things together, get the configuration a bit wrong, and it could allow a particular very knowledgeable attacker to gain access to an entire instance. There are some other things that have come to light, and one of them, I was looking around the internet and saw that the FBI has said that a huge volume of attacks come from BECs, business email compromises. Now, business email compromises are a very special sort of vulnerability. And let's talk about what they are and why they differ from a standard phishing attack. Generally, a phishing attack means that you've received an email that comes from a bogus account. In other words, it's something where the threat actor has managed to configure the email coming to you that looks like it's from a particular and generally trusted source, but it's actually not. That means that there are ways to see that this is an attack. If you're on a desktop or laptop computer, typically you can hover over the links, and that will expand them out in a little window that shows you what the real address is behind the link that you see in the email. And if you see, for example, something that comes from respectedcompany.com, but you hover over it, and it's actually coming from a Gmail account or someplace, if you are looking at something that's respectedcompany.com and the actual address is something .ru, well, the odds are pretty good that you're looking at a phishing attempt. In a BEC, a business email compromise, what the attacker has done is actually go in and compromise an email address at the legitimate company. And so when an email seems to come from respectedcompany.com, it's actually coming from respectedcompany.com. It's just coming from an address at that company that has been compromised, that's been hijacked. Now, BECs are much more difficult to guard against from a technology standpoint and from all of the quick and easy human defenses. There are a lot of companies out there that sell products where they'll go through an email that's coming to your inbox. And if there are these links where there's a mismatch between what it says it is and what it actually is, they will filter it out. They will say, this looks compromised, and they will deal with it before it ever reaches your inbox. It's also, I gave you the thing that's the quick and easy human response. Hover over it, see if it's a mismatch between the visible link and what's actually there. And if so, you can flag it yourself. This is, to make a little bit of a tangent, why threat actors love mobile devices. Because if you're on a smartphone, or even in most cases a tablet, the mechanism to hover over the link before you click on it isn't really there. And so it's much more difficult to do that sort of quick and easy human response. That's why in general, business email is more secure when seen on a laptop or desktop than it is on a smart device. Now, with a BEC, those don't work because the actual address will show up as, well, what it says it is. So what are you to do? From a human standpoint, the basic response is, if someone at respectedcompany.com is asking you to do something out of the ordinary, the best response is to contact them doing something other than clicking on the email and saying, "Are you sure?" Because that just sends an email back to the threat actor who controls the email account. And you know that they will send something that says, "Well, of course, this is legitimate. Sorry to have to worry you, hurry you, make this strange request, but it really is legitimate." No, the thing to do is pick up the phone or go to an instant message or do something that uses a different channel to get a response from this individual. That's especially true if they are asking you to do something unusual. If your normal job description doesn't involve you wiring tens of thousands of dollars someplace within the next hour, then that's a flag. If your normal business doesn't involve you downloading lots of data and sending it off in an attachment, that's a warning. And in any case, if someone asks you for your account information, that's a giant red flag. Here, I will say that I have had conversations with IT departments in my own companies several times when they have done something like that. And I've sent an email message back to them and actually gotten on the phone to the helpline going, "Are you out of your minds? You have just sent a message that convinces your own employees to ignore all the security training they've had over the past few years. Way to go." IT departments hate hearing "way to go" when you say it in a sarcastic manner. So that's why you should configure things well, to draw a big loop around this very involved story. Why? Because it helps minimize the opportunity for business email compromises. Business email compromises not only allow people access to your company's information, but they also are used to inflict damage on your suppliers, on your customers, on your trusted contacts in other companies. Taking care of business email compromises is something that is not simply good security, it's part of being a good corporate citizen. There's an interesting article up right now over on security magazine, securitymagazine.com, that looks at some of the priorities for digital transformation. Digital transformation is the sort of thing that we hear about all the time. It's in some people's language, digitalization. In other words, taking all of our business processes and to the extent possible, making them digital. And one of the things they talk about being a priority is zero trust. Now, zero trust is a really good idea. It does a lot of things. And even if you aren't deeply involved in cybersecurity, you're likely to have heard the phrase zero trust. Now, what does this mean? It basically means that we change the model of security. Once upon a time, you put all of your security spending into the perimeter. You wanted to harden your perimeter and make it impossible for a threat actor to get through. You know, in candy terms, you wanted to make that crunchy candy shell just as hard as it could be so that they didn't gain access to the chewy, delicious center of your data. What people have realized is that there are two things wrong with this model. One is that the attackers are very persistent and often very skilled. The other is that they only have to succeed once, whereas as a defender, you have to succeed 100% of the time if this is going to be true. And typically in this model, once they gained access, once they were trusted inside the perimeter, they were trusted all over the place and they could get all kinds of access to your information. So, what do? In zero trust, once someone's inside the perimeter where you ask them to authenticate, before they can actually do anything, you ask them to authenticate again. There is no assumption of trust once someone was inside the perimeter. You've gotten access to the network, fine. Now you want to get access to an application, show me who you are again, re-authenticate. Want to get access to a data asset, re-authenticate. Want to get access to an infrastructure asset, re-authenticate. The idea is that you now assume that at some point a threat actor is going to make it through your perimeter. And what you're trying to do is make it as non-rewarding as possible to make it into your basic network. The key here is to properly configure all of these different points of re-authentication, because you want to hit this magic point where your users and, oh, by the way, your processes and your hardware are re-authenticating so as to minimize the potential damage, but maximize the efficiency of your business processes. I mean, it is possible if you do it wrong to put so much friction into the system for legitimate users that you mess up the idea of efficiency and productivity. And no company, no organization really wants to sacrifice great gobs of efficiency in the name of cybersecurity. You want to sacrifice only as much as necessary. And that gets down to architecture and configuration. You want to configure things properly because at the same time, you don't want to configure things in such a way that you are so focused on minimizing friction that you don't have enough of these re-authentication points, that you essentially allow a threat actor who has gained access to your network to have too much free reign. It's all about authentication and configuration, figuring out what the proper segmentation is for your network and your application delivery system. Because if you get that right, then everyone is happier on the inside of your company. And the threat actors on the outside of your company achieve maximum unhappiness. That's really what you want. Maximum unhappiness for the illegitimate users, maximum happiness for your legitimate users. So we're talking about the basics here, making sure that your systems are configured properly to begin with. And that involves not only your own infrastructure and your own servers, but all of your cloud instances. I mean, think about how many times over the years we've heard about significant data releases that came about because of a misconfigured S3 bucket or a misconfigured AWS instance or an Azure instance. Now, all of these cloud systems have gotten much better at making sure that the defaults are to secure behavior rather than insecure. But in every case, it is still quite possible to configure them insecurely. Don't do that. Make sure that you are configuring them securely before you go live. The other thing is to make sure that your users are configuring their systems properly. There was another article that I saw this week that talked about something, there we go. This is on dark reading. It says one third of Americans use easy to guess pet passwords. Now, what does this mean? It means that your password contains or is in total the name of your pet, your current pet, or your first pet, or your favorite pet. I want you to stop just for a moment now that I've listed those three things and ask yourself how many times you've seen a quiz on social media. And somewhere in there, they'd ask you, what was the name of your first pet? We can tell you your personality by knowing your pet's name. You give it to them. Congratulations. You've just helped someone guess your password in roughly a third of the cases. So what do we want to do? We want to make sure that our users aren't using pet names as passwords. This is important because A, we don't want them to have access to our users' email or network access or application account. And two, because another thing that we know from looking at passwords across the industry is that a vast number of users will reuse passwords. That means that if they've used their pet name for their social media password, pick your favorite social media platform. If there is a breach there, that means that threat actors who get a hold of the particular file of stolen passwords will feel free to use it on things like your corporate network. You don't want them doing that. So you help your users configure things. Now, in a lot of cases, companies are forcing the issue. They now have systems that say You must use at least one number, uppercase and lowercase letters, one special symbol from a list of permissible special symbols, no repeating digits, no dictionary words, things like that. The idea is that people will come up with hard to remember random collections of characters. In reality, most users figure out pretty quickly that if you put dictionary words in a string along with numbers and these other things, that they pass through just fine. So help them configure. Teach them things like getting away from passwords, beginning to use passphrases. Because Muffin, if that's the name of your dog or cat or toad or whatever, is a pretty weak password. My favorite toad's name is Muffin 9364 exclamation point hash sign. It's pretty strong. It's long. That long string of words jammed together make for a really fairly convincingly strong password. Passphrases. Free tip for the week. And finally, when we're talking about configuration, use it in a broad sense. Do your best to make sure that all of your training, all of your training collateral, and all of your authentication and behavioral systems work together to stress the same kind of strong security. Nothing frustrates users more than having these various systems emphasize different things and lead them in different directions. Make sure that everything is consistent across these. That way, you're much less likely to have configuration as the word that causes you a headache, much more likely to be something that brings strength to your cybersecurity. Well, that's going to be just about it for this episode of A Word on Cybersecurity. I hope you'll join me next week at this time. And if you're joining me via recorded copy, either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, thank you. I appreciate it. On LinkedIn, the recording is available within seconds of the close of the live event. On YouTube, it's usually up the Monday following the Friday live event. I appreciate you being here. Look for me on Twitter at KG4GWA. Also, if you're going to be at either RSA or Black Hat, or for that matter, DEF CON, let me know. I'll be at all three. Would love to meet you. Feel free to send me a direct message on any of my social media accounts or leave a comment here. I'd love to know what you think of the program and what your word for this week might be. Well, again, thanks for being here. I'm Curt Franklin, Senior Analyst at Omdia, saying so long. See you next time.